So I want to talk about the idea of men in sort of culture. It's like really interesting, right? I've just talked about that in the last podcast, but I also wanted to sort of emphasize if you think about people that are movie stars, men that are movie stars, the percentage of them that have had steroids or take steroids is actually pretty stunning. If you just look at them, you either have, like I was suggesting, you either have that sort of manly men type in the last video or in the last podcast, or you have kind of like the buffoon type, the sort of comedian that everybody laughs at. Um, and I think we really have to address this, that this is a serious issue that people really need to talk about, right? The number of people that would take steroids after you observe these sort of so-called role models that you see in on TV, actors and whatnot, that literally take steroids, like crazy. Many of them are not open about it. Some of them are. And then when you look at them, you just know that it's physically impossible for somebody to look like that. You would have to be just basically a human freak to look like some people that you see on, sort of movie stars and things like that. Um, and we need to sort of address those things, right? Like that is physically impossible to be like that. And so, what does that drive? A, it drives a lot of people to sort of not respect their bodies. And it's not just women, right? Like I think that's where I'm getting at, is the emphasis is often on women, but man, there is a lot of men that try to do all sorts of stupid things to their bodies to make them look good and all that kind of stuff, to make them look manly, and put on do a bunch of steroids and things like that. There is a awful lot of people that do that. Um, and I think that's something to actually pursue and talk about and be open about, that is not possible. If you look at normal athletic men, right? Like normal athletes, that that there's not going to be sort of steroid use within those particular fields, right? It's just not common. Um, you see muscular men, but they are not abnormal and not weird looking, right? They're not like kind of freakishly looking with their shoulders and their chest, and they're not all red, and all of that kind of stuff is sort of telltale tales of taking steroids. The sort of eight packs that you see, right? Like most normal functioning human beings don't look like that. And the reason is they're not taking performance enhancing drugs, and you need to sort of take a step back and start teaching that and recognizing and be open about that is not it's not possible, right? And we need to be okay with telling kids that. I think, like, if you're in that role model situation, right, where you are doing that, you should be well aware and be open to kids that you are taking steroids, and have many conversations about it in terms of what that actually means, right? And get into some of those things, or in the sort of trade-offs that you take, because I think, you know, a lot of kids, there's a lot, virtually all of the sort of wrestling and all of that kind of stuff is like super crazy steroid use. But then that creates, it sort of makes people look like this. One tall tale, in terms of how I know that there's lots of people doing sort of steroids, is I look at students that are the ages of 18 to 19 years old, and they're not spectacularly big, right? Like the population that I see on a regular basis, on a university campus, those people are not unusually big in any sort of way. But then when you look at somebody or a group of population of people that are in their 30s and 40s, they're far bigger, and it's not just body fat. It's you could tell that they have like a steroid use and things like that. It's just humanly not possible. It's like looking at women, right? the same thing is that you see a lot of augmentation that happens when people start being able to afford those things in their 30s. And then you start, all of a sudden, you're like, wow, there's lots of people that have um, interesting bodies, I guess, at that point that were just not physically possible. If you look at um, I don't want to get myself sort of in trouble, and that's not what I mean, but you just look at the general population of somebody that wouldn't be through those pressures, and or maybe they're exposed to those pressures but don't have the financial means to do that. Go to another country, for example, that just it's not common to do any of that kind of stuff, or they just don't have the financial resources. You'll notice that nobody looks like that. And it's the tall tale sign that there are weird things going on, even though people don't admit it, right? And so we have to be open about that in terms of our society and what we mean and what we want to be like, and the conversations that we want to have. Um, I try to be open with my kids about that kind of stuff. Obviously, I don't talk about it all the time, but when it comes up, I try to be open and say, hey, there's lots of people that do steroids and do things that are not good for their health in the long run. Um, Regardless of whether you agree whether steroids are good or bad for your health, it's still doing something that is sort of quote unquote cheating the system, right? Because we can't openly talk about those things, right? So at that point, what I want to address and what I want to think about is just be aware of that, right? Like just start looking around and start thinking about that. You know, people are not telling you the whole story. That's an important lesson that I learned, and that you learn as you get kind of more experience with these. People do not tell you the whole thing. They lie, cheat, and steal, and all that kind of stuff. Like they're really not forthright in a lot of things. And so you have to be comfortable with knowing that real life, what real life actually is far different than the sort of picture that people display to you. And just be well aware of that when you make your choices and think about yourself and the world around you. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day.